what we are going to do is we are going to bring all of our panelists to the fore. So if you are still here, lovely speakers, we're delighted to welcome you back. But we've also been joined by the fabulous Grace Youngworth, who has been quietly sitting behind the scenes. And I know, Grace, that we were speaking earlier on in the week and you were like, I'd really like to come and join for the panel or something like that. And I was hoping, Grace, firstly, if you'd just like to introduce yourself so we all know who you are, and then just maybe provide any reflections either on what we've just heard or your thoughts with regards to critical choices. So Grace, over to yourself, and I'll spotlight you, but I will come with you into the spotlight so it doesn't make you feel so exposed. But would you like to introduce yourself and then your thoughts and reflections?
Yeah, no problem. Can you hear me okay, Sarah?
Can indeed, yeah.
Great. For those that don't know me, I'm Grace Youngworth. I'm a technical director of mining and mine water at WSP Mining, but I also am our ESG and mining leader. For those that don't know WSP Mining, we're the largest global technical consultancy in mining, and we support mining projects through the whole life cycle. So right from the beginning, through operations and infrastructure development and into closure. So for me, I guess my perspective is that for critical choice, it's probably aligned with a lot of the discussions today. Whatever builds trust with both investors and communities, stakeholders, all mining stakeholders, is really the key to advancing some of these really important projects that we need. And so that involves clear and transparent consideration of all the ESG factors, project by project, so that we can help convincing both investors and stakeholders that these projects are really worthwhile. And that's the sort of space that I work in there, is transitioning these sort of commitments into actionable programs that middle managers and those responsible for projects can deliver and follow. And from a trust point of view, this is really important during operations. That's absolutely important, but it's also more important than ever at closure. And in our business, my closure colleagues tell me that 75% of mines are closed unplanned. And it's not because resources are exhausted. It's normally because of other factors like political factors, market, social license to operate, those sorts of things. So working your closure planning into all the technical aspects of mine development is so critical, because you might be closing unexpectedly and you have that legacy, as the mine is just a temporary land user, but the other stakeholders there for longer. So I guess from my point of view, it's really important to have this connection between commitments and actionable projects. I think still the industry doesn't really understand what that is. We need to be thinking about future ready mining, and that includes all aspects of ESG. And in order to do that well, we need to make sure that all our technical practitioners understand those critical ESG factors. We've embarked on a program with our teams internally to do that, which is being rolled out, and it's working quite well. And it was a lot of education. And so, not just external education to the public, but actually practitioner education is really, really important. And I guess I'm slightly different to Daryl in that I have to remain optimistic. And I feel like the answer here is baby steps. There's not one big answer. It's going to be a combination of 100 small changes that we make as an industry that will allow us to get there. So yeah, I guess that's my thoughts and reflections. But yeah, some really great discussions today.
Brilliant. Thank you very, very much for that, Grace. I'm now going to bring everybody else to the fore so we can have a bit of a discussion about that. And maybe, Matt, if I bring you in first. So Grace was mentioning things like we always need to be incorporating that visualization of closure, etc., so that it is a real thing that can be achieved all the way through the process. And Richard Harrington, of course, mentioned this in his talk earlier in the week. Do you have any thoughts on that? And then I'll go open up to the full panel.
Yeah, I think, you're going to guess I'm going to go straight back to exploration. As we know, it all starts with exploration. But again, that's where the biggest opportunity with a lot of this stuff is. So if we can basically incentivize exploration geologists to engage with that concept of what is it going to be at the end of the day, that's where I think the biggest difference can be. Because of the, like I said, at the moment, we're not quite there. You know, we're at that short-term thinking, whereas really unless you embed that kind of bigger picture thinking within the whole value of things, yeah, that's the only way you're going to do it. And instead of it just thinking of, oh, we're just going to close and that's it, go away, it needs to be that long-term future that you're kind of thinking of. And you know, I think most exploration geologists want that. You know, I want that. I live in the north of England where there's a huge legacy with the mining sector and mining industry, and it's always it feels like quite a big missed opportunity of how those societies and communities in the UK, anywhere else in the world, have kind of always left out by that failure of that long-term thinking, which is another thing I challenge us to think about.
Yeah, no, we've certainly got lots of examples of that in the UK, don't we, Matt? So what we're going to do is I'm going to do a little lap of our wonderful panelists and start by asking you, and Libby, if I may, I might start with your wonderful self. Having sat here and listened, be it today or through the week, is there anything that you would like to highlight that you were either pleased to hear, surprised to hear, frustrated to hear? What do you want to raise? We'll go to Libby first, and then we'll go to Vanessa.
Yeah, thanks, Sarah. There's been a lot to think about this morning. I unfortunately haven't been able to join through the rest of the week. The one that I think frustrated me the most, and I'll start there because I have a couple of comments, is the graphic that Darren put up, because I think it is highlighting some of the challenges that the exploration and mining industry faces. And I'm more optimistic than Darren that we will see changes. I know certainly for ourselves within BHP, we do have a ventures group and an innovation group, both of which are looking at putting investment and resources into those untested technologies and looking to see spaces where they can be trialed within our own assets and exploration projects. But again, it's not that step change. It's not that big difference that we can put a pin in. And I think that's probably the frustrating thing is, and it's the same as you asked me about exploring. It is right now, it's ripples. It's not a big, it's fly fishing, not dynamite. And maybe that's a good thing. But how do we change it? And it's been so gratifying to listen to the conversations today, because I think the more people we have in the industry or adjacent to the industry, or who for some reason have stumbled on this and not been engaged with the industry before, that we can get them to bring their ideas and work this. We have to work this out together. And that's what I've enjoyed about the discussions this morning, is hearing all of the different ideas of how we can solve this, that there is a desire to solve it.
Brilliant. Thank you very, very much, Libby. And Darren, you knew that slide was going to invoke some emotion, didn't you? See, we knew it. Vanessa, what do you reckon? And then we're going to bring in Kartik.
Okay, so it's turning into a bit of a poll on whether or not we agree with Darren, but I think probably both in the camp that I am similarly pessimistic, that short of a fundamental change, I don't think we're going to get anywhere near it. And, you know, if you look at the sweep of history, major changes have tended to happen in chaos. It's almost always been disorderly transitions. And when there has been an orderly transition, it's usually been delivered by something like a more or less benevolent dictatorship. So given this is a global problem, I can't see us developing a global dictatorship anytime soon. So that said, in terms of, I do think there is a lot that could change, but it takes an effort of will amongst the elites, and that then there needs to be enforceable frameworks that force that change, because I think the degree of inertia we've talked about, Mark talking about the markets and investors who are wedded to the capital streams that come from oil and gas. They're not going to let that go while they still have the option, and while that still provides what it provides. It has to be stopped for that to change. You know, human nature is what it is. Inertia and resistance to change will stymie us unless people are forced into that uncomfortable space of having to change.
Well, Vanessa, we will all vote for you to be the global dictator. Just putting that
Okay.
one
Yep.
out there. Yeah.
I'd make a fantastic queen.
Okay.
Just give me the job.
There we go. Okay. Hold
Okay.
on to that thought. We'll come back to it in a second. Kartik, please save us. What were your reflections other than us now being truly terrified? But Kartik, what do you reckon? And then we'll go to Matt.
I'm not the one to be saving anyone, so I will I will directly respond to the poll that Vanessa nicely articulated. I think maybe I'll start with a note of positivity, which is that echoing what I said earlier, I do think that you know, despite the prevailing sort of dynamics and the prevailing you know, incumbents, you know, pursuing what they've always pursued, whether it's, you know, getting more stuff out of the ground or whatever it is, there has been quite a lot of sort of change, not only in orientation, but also in terms of resources flowing to financial resources flowing to sort of things that we need to solve some of these bigger problems. So I think that's something positive to take away. We may not reach where we need to reach, but better than nothing, I suppose. But I think Vanessa highlighted something really important, which is that you know, this is about fundamentally politics and power, and basically, if our governments, our politicians, sort of in combination with the people that influence them, you know, large companies and various others, if they don't sort of like make the right decisions, it's sort of hard to see how we're going to reach sort of, you know, I think Mark was showing the 1.52 and above. Hard to see how we're going to get to those points. So I think it really is about, you know, to the extent, maybe one thing I would say as a reflection is that to the extent that, you know, I'm not in the mining industry, but to the extent that people here are, and there's a true belief in wanting to actually try to contribute to solving some of these global challenges, then actually, you know, you have more influence than me. I'm just a person. But if you're a large, you know, if you're part of a large company, you have perhaps more of a chance to influence decision makers to be able to do something about this.
Awesome. Thank you very, very much, Kartik. Fantastic. Matt, over to you, and then we'll go to Darren.
So I'll probably start saying, Libby, ripples form into waves. So the ripples that this BHP Explorer is kind of forming, they're going to go somewhere. So keep supporting and keep going, because I think it's absolutely fantastic to see that kind of initiative starting, and more of the same. Darren, I agree that the way things are now aren't where we necessarily wanted them to be when we look past, but this goes back to that kind of question of silos and being narrowed. The innovations that can be created within that space of the current how we mine are kind of constrained within the system that's there. So there's only so much you can really do of optimizing the things that need to be there. I think I used the quote earlier, which is, you know, the worst thing engineers can do is optimize something that shouldn't exist. So maybe we should kind of redefine how we kind of do that. And then again, leading into that question of the wicked problems we're facing. So the challenges of today are different to yesterday, and they'll be different again tomorrow. So if you go back 10 years in the past, what we're doing now that's fundamentally different than today. And I'd say that I think change can happen very quickly. We might not be able to envisage it now, but even little things like, not little things, but big things that just happen that all of a sudden flip our systems upside down. The one that comes to mind initially is BHP trying to gobble up Anglo American. that could really fundamentally change the whole system and the market of how big companies operate. You know, all of a sudden we've got a mega giant who dominates the whole copper market. The interest of people like new actors on the play, like Saudi Arabia, you know, that 10, 15 years ago, they were nowhere. Where else are these big systems gonna come from? We talked a bit about oil and gas. Mining as a sector, Ludivine had a wonderful quote the other day, I can't remember off the top of my mind. The size of the whole mining sector together is pittance compared to some of these other sectors. So all of a sudden, maybe an oil and gas company decides to gobble up the whole of the mining industry. And then a tech company, you know, so these things could happen very, very quickly. And I think in the 10, when did you say 10 years time, Sarah, when we're going to revisit some of these things, I'm quite optimistic that something radically is going to happen. I think the time for change is kind of now. And I'd kind of go back to my challenge of everyone to make that choice. You know, it's all within our powers to do something. And I think, yeah, let's get on with it, as we said before.
Love it. So we've had the optimist that is Matt, who's the exploration geologist. Darren, bring us back down to earth. What are your final comments before I go to the last final question for everyone?
It's below ground, isn't it? It's below earth, isn't it? The thing that's different. If I take you from 1987, when I started my degree in mining in Kalgoorlie, to now, the people are the difference. You know, when I joined Worley, my commitment was to create a team that everyone wanted to join and no one wanted to leave. And we started 2 years ago with zero, and last year we turned over $1.3 billion in revenue with that team. And if you look at the dynamics of that team and the change that we made in a short amount of time, they were mission-focused people. And that's the difference between 1987 and now, is that people want to leave a legacy, people want to make a difference, and they're much more connected through conferences like the Responsible Raw Materials Conference to understand that there are other people out there. So although I sound pessimistic, I'm a Labrador on a leash, right? I'm a very optimistic person, but I'm trying to be realistic. And I think that the way we change is through the people that are mission focused and create. And you look at the young, the people that will replace us, and they're a different character. They're no longer going to stay on that railway track. They're going to try things that are different, and they'll move and they'll shift and they'll transition from one place to another as they try and understand their own perspective in life. So my greatest confidence is in the next generation coming through, and my plan is to continue to come to great conferences like this one and listen and learn and hear other people's thoughts, but set the footwork or the infrastructure or the foundations of which that next generation can stand on and make the transition and the changes that we need. So I'm with Libby on that. You know, I think it is ripple step by step, and what Matt alludes to as well. But I think it will accelerate as we leave and the next generation take over.
Great, fantastic. Thank you, Darren. So we're now going to pose one final question to all of our lovely panelists. And that question is, okay, you've been given a magic wand and you are allowed to change one thing. Okay, so one thing, and it could be anything to do in the entire world. So Vanessa, you can indeed be the global dictator should you wish. Okay, of course. So you're allowed to change one thing. What is that one thing that you change? Grace, I'm going to come to you first, and then I'm going to go to Libby. What are you going to change?
It's a very good question. I think to make the most impact, what probably needs to be changed is a financial system that rewards responsible mining. So a system where there actually is a financial gain for doing mining in the right way. Right now, some of the majors are leading the way by self-funding innovation and other things like that, as Libby mentioned, and lots of the majors are doing that. They all have innovation projects. Actually, even some mid-tiers are spending their own money on innovation, but they're not seeing that return from the market. And I think if we really want to make a step change, that's the one thing I would change.
Brilliant. Thank you, Grace. Libby, what do you reckon? And then we'll go to the global dictator herself, Vanessa.
Yeah, this is an interesting one, and I will, because I do work for one of those big companies, caveat that this is a personal opinion. To me, and I'll go back to exploration because I think that's where it starts, and I think it's where a lot of the knock-on effects come from. And I'm going to talk about the financial situation again as well. I'd like all explorers to be exploring for something that should then have to be mined. To explain that a little bit, not everything we find needs to be dug out of the ground. There are places where we shouldn't. We should leave it be. Is it a marginal deposit that survives because of the ebb and flow of the commodity price? You know, those are the kinds of questions we should be asking ourselves, and has been put by Matt and a few others. These are the kinds of questions that the exploration geologists should be asking themselves, and those companies doing that exploring need to be looking at the communities, the environment, the desire. Should this deposit be exploited? Should it be extracted? Do we need it as a global society? And I don't think that those questions are being asked enough by investors who potentially still see the exploration industry as a way to roll the dice to maybe make a lot of money, and not necessarily think about what they're actually trying to achieve. And very much caveated, that is my personal opinion.
It's okay, Libby, we shall attribute it all to yourself. Fantastic, thank you. Vanessa, what do you reckon? And then we'll go to...
Okay, so I'll forego the global dictatorship piece, but if we're talking sort of magic realism, I think that the thing that I would, you know, what would be to me solve this problem, which is partly why I question whether or not it's solvable, is that we would have instantly created a set of goals that covered the whole of our system. So the whole planetary system, also business systems, human systems, that we had an agreed set of measurable and manageable goals that everybody could work to. So first of all, so mining doesn't exist in a vacuum. It feeds a demand. And that's part of the issue, is that if you don't dig stuff out of the ground that people want, gold being a great example of it, all sorts of bad things happen, because then people do it on the sly and around the edges. Anyway, the other aspect of having this whole of system goals and agreed goals is, secondly, I would say, if you could magically make it somehow that for every single one of us, the impact of our actions would be realized in our lifetime. So anything that you or I or anybody else did would come back to us within our current earthly state. People would be a lot more careful about what it was that they did. So I don't know whether we need to reinstate some kind of belief in God, and like a universal belief in an afterlife with the punitive God. That could work. And the actions that God, like revamping the 10 Commandments in some way to turn it into a set of sustained, like maybe echoing the UN SDGs or something.
So Vanessa has now elevated herself from global dictator to God.
No, just God's representative on earth. That'll do.
Excellent. Thank you. So we're just dreaming small here. Brilliant. Kartik, beat that. And then we're going to go
yeah, I can't. So I'll stay in the earthly realm. But very much related to what Vanessa said, perhaps a specific instantiation of that. I would probably say, if I could wave the wand, I would install a carbon price that is enforced. I think that won't solve any problem fully, but it can certainly get things moving in the right direction. And it can do exactly what Vanessa said, which is to get all of us, I'm an economist, so to get all of us to internalize, the externalities that we're all imposing on each other, essentially. So that's what I would do. Not God level stuff, but
pretty punchy. So Kartik, fantastic. Thank you for that. Matt, over to yourself, and then we'll go to Darren.
Yeah, I waved my arms in support of Libby, and then I realised that that was our secret sign for Zoom bombing, so that hasn't happened. So apologies if anyone got worried about that. So no, I absolutely agree with that. I think it's fantastic, and again, echoing what a lot of people are saying, it all comes down to money, longer term finance that really values what we do. And then I go back to that word value. What do we mean, and how do you define value? Because at the moment, if it's just shareholder return or value of the mineral in the ground, I worry about those unintended consequences. So if we're just like, oh, we just value what's in the ground, then it could lead to things like, because if I'm honest, as an exploration geologist, we have a lot of these minerals. It's just at what cost are we prepared to get them? So deep sea mining, going to various places on the planet that really would result in all this kind of other degradation. If we don't add in those other values into how we kind of characterize these projects, I worry that we're never going to get to that more sustainable future that we're trying to get to. So yeah, so value, and at what cost are we prepared to do this?
Well, thanks, Matt. Darren, what do you reckon?
I love what Kartik, Grace, and Matt have just said. I would love a financial system that better rewarded best practice. Created just like Apple and Samsung race to best technology available. They're allowed to innovate and invent and try new things and fail. I'd love a financial system, maybe based on carbon, that rewards that sort of activity. One of the things this is what Worley's all about. Our mission is to create a more sustainable world. So we actively encourage this sort of thinking, and I'll take this back to some friends in Worley, some of whom you know, Sarah, and maybe come up with something else, the second revision of that dodgy chart that I put up, and see what we can do.
Brilliant. Awesome. Thank you very much, Darren. And a nice and practical action there to finish with. But on the subject of finishing, Ludovine, I know that you've got some thoughts that you want to share. This is Ludovine going, no, not yet, Sarah. Pad a little bit more. But Ludovine, we've sat here this week, and I think we have been, we've been so privileged to listen and engage and have the opportunity to challenge and discuss thoughts that have come from over 65 people from around the world. So, firstly, everyone, I'd just like you to give the Responsible Raw Materials volunteer team the most amazing round of applause. Absolutely fantastic. We couldn't have done any of this without you. So massive thank you. And that thank you, of course, also goes to Rose, who's on maternity leave at the moment, and the new little person that's in this world, because little person, we are doing this for you. And one day when you watch this and you're like, no, did they really talk about me? Yes, we did. Yes, we did. So we're doing this for the future, and a massive thank you to the team. This is the 5th time we've done it. I think we're just, well, I would say suckers for punishment, but I don't think we are. I think we learn so much during this week every year. It certainly allows me to not just have ripples in my mind, but actually go through big step changes and have these big aha moments. I know that these conferences every year certainly shape my thinking. So it's a very selfish endeavor. Why do we do it? Yeah, we do it for free, but it's so that we can learn collectively. And of course, make all of this available for everybody who wants to tap in and watch the different videos, because they're all free to watch. But Ludovine, any final thoughts from your wonderful self?
Well, yes, there's kind of 3 words that came to me throughout all of our conversations. The first one is myths, because I think we debunked a lot of myths and slogans. And I don't know if it's a factor of the stress that our systems are under, or just we've gotten too used to Zoom and social media, but there's a lot of noise. Right? There's a lot of slogans. There's a lot of, let's talk value addition. And then we don't even ask what value is or question the word addition. Let's talk about new win-win partnerships. And then, right out of the gate, the first question is, how do you define a win-win partnership when they're so completely opaque, none of us can poke at them? So there's a lot of statements of intent, and I feel that this week we really pushed beyond quite a few. And so I'm very, very grateful for that, because I think we need to move beyond the noise. The second word that's coming up, and I'm directly stealing this one from your playbook, is elephant in the room. So there is a completely known, often discussed, and frankly, I find generally unacknowledged risk of like global and existential, value stake issue. And we are all, it seems to me, very aware that change is necessary, but yet somehow we keep doing a lot of business as usual. So I think the tension between urgency and inertia may be part of the stress and part of the slogans. But I got a lot of what came through this week was about how to move beyond the inertia, acknowledge the urgency, but not adopt chicken without a head strategies. As I said, we've debunked quite a few myths there too. And the last thing that really struck with me was, we do see models emerging. So we went into this conversation because we thought, we keep talking about, well, we need new models. Okay, so we asked people, what are your new models? And there were a lot emerging. But what we really also picked up was the difficulty of facing our own limitations, our own resistance to change, and the difficulty of even fostering those little unquantified, unknown pockets of future opportunity. So I was really struck by the discussion of the parachute science. I had no idea what that meant. For those who still don't, parachute science is basically, you take somebody who has a lot of the keys to their skill, drop them into a situation, they develop some science, and then they pull out. Their immersion or impact on their context is nil. I'm sorry, but that applies to parachute consultancy. It applies to parachute management. It applies to parachute governance. So I'm really struck by the effort that I need to now make to question my own models. And this kind of ties back to what we were saying earlier. What's the cost of new models emerging? I'm just very nervous that we keep thinking we are the first to face this. And yes, the stakes are global and existential, so the tools will not be the same as before, but humanity has gone through massive model changes. And if all we're concerned about is who's going to pay for it, then the answer has already been given by previous examples. When the railroad emerged, the Carnegies and the Vanderbilts built them, went bust. The state picked them up, and it became a common good. So I'm just very aware that we should also question how we've gone through model changes before, even though the stakes are bigger or different. So that's a lot of what I picked up. And frankly, what will stay with me is the rethinking of the word value from Jeff Townsend, who reminded us that value is actually relative. It is in the eye of the beholder, and that recognizing that relativity is step one to redefining it. So that's my main takeaway.
Awesome. Thank you very, very much, Ludovine, and well done in being able to try and summarize some of our huge amounts of thoughts over the course of the last week. So with that, everybody, we have hit time. Absolute pleasure to be with you over the course of the last week. If you want to go back and review any of those videos, I know I certainly will be, please go to the website, click on those links, and you'll also see that we've been adding in additional material where the speakers have provided it to us. It should be gently appearing in with their abstracts and their videos. We've had a number of suggestions as to how we can keep things going through the year. So it's been suggested maybe a podcast or something like that. If you've got any ideas as to how we can keep these ideas flowing through the year, do let us know. It hasn't been decided if we're going to do number 6 yet. Ludovine, what do you reckon? Maybe we should take that offline.
Yeah, we never should answer this on the Friday.
Exactly. But no, absolutely fantastic. And thank you very, very much, everybody. Again, you have all been amazing. We will leave it there and see you in 2025. Thanks, everybody. See you then.
Thank you.